Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be looking at the other preseason game from last night in the New York Giants versus the Detroit Lions. So, actually, we did just a couple minutes ago get a report from Ian Rappaport about the status of Drew Lock, who did start for the Giants. Not a great showing for him. Ended up throwing an interception on a third down. Was a pretty bad decision there going into double coverage. But he ended up going down as well with an injury at one point. And Ian Rappaport just tweeted out that he is dealing with, quote, a bad bone contusion and strained oblique from last night's game, that he is expected to miss some time, but no surgery is required, and that the Giants could look to add another quarterback in the meantime. Danny DeVito looked fine, for whatever it's worth, in the remainder of that preseason game, so feels like DeVito probably ends up becoming quarterback 2, at least for the time being. It's not like Drew Lock gave all that much to be really excited about with last night's game, but obviously just talking about a singular preseason game, hard to put all that much stock into that in comparison to what's been going on at camp. But the offensive line is obviously where the focus is on with the Giants, so I want to talk about that, but really what stood out to me even more so was the play of some of their young players in the secondary. We just previewed the upcoming season for the Giants earlier this week, and I was talking about the fact that I do like a lot of New York's front seven. The issue is going to be there's a lot of inexperience in that secondary, and that they are going to be likely relying on a lot of unprovens. But last night, looked pretty good from some of the key players. Deontay Banks, their first round selection from 2023, I thought that he looked really good. I was definitely interested to see what Tyler Nubin was able to give them. The Giants took him in the second round out of Minnesota in this past year's draft. And the number one thing, because I've watched limited film on him from Minnesota, the number one thing that stood out to me was his ability to step up in the run game. And that was definitely very apparent for me last night. Got in on a handful of plays there, even if they were just more so sort of in, helping out on other plays, maybe some combined tackles there. But Nubin, it sounds like as well with his draft profile, 13 interceptions during his time at Minnesota, that he can also be a factor in the pass game. So I would definitely be encouraged about what I saw from Tyler Nubin if I am a Giants fan. And then the other player that stood out was Trey Hawkins III, who the Giants selected in the 6th round in 2023, and I thought that he was also pretty impressive. Had a pass deflection, was also in on a couple tackles himself. So the three of them, between Deontay Banks, Tyler Nubin, and Trey Hawkins, I think that you can come out of that feeling pretty good about how it all played out in New York last year. These are all guys that are probably going to end up getting... Deontay Banks, without a question, is going to be the starter on the outside corner for the Giants. But, Nubin and Hawkins, if they can end up at least just being playable options and serviceable options, I think that it's probably not a bad thing, because, again, just a lot of inexperience in that secondary, and there are going to be opportunities for players, these young players, to sort of step up and make a name for themselves. So, that was something that was pretty encouraging for me in general. Additionally, diving into the offensive line conversation, but also just a little bit as well, the running back conversation, because for the Giants, you lose Saquon Barkley in the offseason. Feels like this is a team that the offense was so bad last year. If there were any positives, it was mostly in the run game, but it's a steep decrease, or downgrade, I should say, from Saquon Barkley to Devin Singletary, but ultimately got some pretty good production last night. Again, preseason, have to keep prefacing that there's, only so much stock you can put into it, but I thought it was a pretty good performance from the running back room for the Giants, where ultimately you see the likes of a Tyrone Tracy, who ended up giving you some good production, the patience of the run from, I'm trying to remember exactly which one of the running backs it was here. I have it in my notes somewhere here in regards to the run that was broken off for a touchdown. It was Eric Gray. And what Eric Gray was able to give you, 2 touchdowns in this game, absolutely shattered the ankles of Lions defensive back Maurice Norris for a 48-yard touchdown there on a halfback draw. So that was a pretty exciting moment there. And then again, you just talk generally speaking here with the Giants and what they were able to get out of their offensive line, and because of we got some comments here from him. Great to see you. Thanks for joining in here. He said had to leave a chat for a while because of the Boston list. I see. Well, we are talking Giants right now, but definitely if you have any questions or anything along those lines, be sure to let us know what you're thinking. But just sort of talking up here these preseason games, really good production from the running backs, 27 carries as a whole, 155 yards and a couple touchdowns. Some nice efficiency, like I mentioned, from the big run from Eric Gray, had the other touchdown on a goal line opportunity. And then I thought that Tyrone Tracy looked pretty solid as well. And behind an offensive line that obviously we just talked about the Patriots and their struggles at offensive line, the Giants are sort of in a similar boat in terms of there's a lot of unknown in terms of what's going on with that offensive line. Made some moves in the offseason to try and add some depth there. So we got to see a couple names that the Giants invested into over the course of the offseason, and it was Andrew Stinney, I believe his name is, that he is projected to be a starter for the Giants this upcoming season. Aaron Stinney, my apologies. He played, and I thought that he looked especially good in the run protection in general here. I thought that he got better as the game went on. I really liked the pass blocking. Granted, he was playing right guard, so it's not like at a prime position for pass blocking, but I thought that overall Stinney was solid, somebody that's probably going to get significant playing time for the Giants. They also had a little bit of runway as well for Austin Schlottman, who was another free agent signing for the Giants offensive line. I thought that he was maybe a little bit weaker, probably not going to be a starter for the Giants long term, but ultimately I thought that the Giants O-line held up pretty decently for whatever it's worth. On the Lions side of this, they weren't necessarily running out quite as many players from a starting perspective. They didn't even pick up a first down for the entire first quarter, but I think that they were ultimately, it was fun watching Hendon Hooker get some runway. He ended up coming in for the second half. He at one point just straight ran through one of the Giants defensive backs. I thought that he was overall pretty good. Drive ended up stalling out in the red zone. Maybe a throw that could have been made, but ended up keeping it instead. And again, they just ended up getting shut down a little bit down in the red zone. But I thought that Hooker was pretty good. Definitely looked to be back to a little bit of his athletic self. Last time we really saw him extensively was, or at least myself personally speaking, was prior to the ACL tear that he suffered at Tennessee. So was good to see him sort of have a little bit of a bounce back there, but ultimately I thought that he was good. The other name that actually for the Giants I did want to highlight as well is Deontay Johnson. Made a number of pretty nice plays, linebacker for the Giants, and I was pretty impressed with ultimately, what he was able to give you for whatever it's worth. This is a linebacking core that I'm actually pretty high on, from Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. Maybe you throw in Azeez Ojulari as well, as long as he can stay healthy. But Deontay Johnson was a pretty impressive performer for the Giants as well in that game, so wanted to give a little bit of love there. Malik Neighbors did make his Giants debut, didn't get on that much runway, 12 plays, 0 targets, so would have been fun to see anything there. You can say a little bit of the same for Terrion Arnold, the first round selection by the Detroit Lions. He at least played, the first drive or so, but not a lot of action on his end. So, again, we're talking about just so much with preseason, but it was a lot of fun, just that football is around the corner. Definitely really looking forward to the upcoming season. But if you had any other big-time takeaways, definitely be sure to share them in the comment section as we try and make the show as interactive as possible. But we are now going to be taking our final break of the show. When we come back, we're going to be previewing the upcoming season for the Washington Commanders. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.